You're walking in the woods. There's no one around and your phone is dead. Out of the corner of your eye, you spot him.
Hello there, today we're going to be taking a look at the scenario Deadlight, written by the late Alan Bligh and published by Chaosium. Recently, this has seen an update and re-release in Deadlight and Other Dark Turns, polishing the scenario somewhat, solving many of its outstanding issues, and upgrading its artwork, even though most of it is black, well, all of it is black and white. I think the PDF is, however, coloured. This scenario recently made my top 5 for Halloween for its brutal, short and tense atmosphere, hitting that slasher vibe as a group try to survive a stormy night, while trying to unravel what actually happened to unleash this unstoppable horror. A very slasher-esque theme and feel has the potential dread and fear of the unknown play on the players from start to finish. As a crime goes wrong and the entity from beyond our ken is released into the world to seek and feast on anything it can catch. I set the whole game up with the premise of another scenario, much like most of the sort of commentary or feedback you'll get when you want to play this game or this scenario is that you want to use a misdirect at the start so they don't know they're actually playing Deadlight. I'd also like to say that maybe you should pair it with something that's a little on the low mythos side, so it's not so heavy-handed like, oh, I'm going to solve a mythos crime, and on the way I bump into a mythos crime. It's a little bit too much, and it's a little bit sort of overloaded, I feel. It makes for a good plugin, and it arcs into many of the campaigns, and I would probably call this a plug-in scenario. I ran this as a beginner game though, and we had a ton of fun. The scenario opens with the group travelling in a car along a twisting back road as the churning storm threatens to open the heavens and drench the countryside. Dramatically, a young woman stumbles onto the road in the pouring rain and forces the car to swerve. This is a high drama opening that leaves a lot of questions as they stumble into the ongoing story, almost media res. There's a lot going on to unravel for them. I would also introduce a commotion within the car as a distraction beforehand, so that they actually do hit McAlea, who's the girl who's stumbling out the woods. This could be the buffeting wind rocks the car onto two wheels, or a thundering lightning strike sort of blinds the driver for a split second as McAlea sort of stumbles onto the road, and then all of a sudden she's in the headlights and she's toppling over the sort of bonnet as she cracks her head. You could also perhaps roll the thunder and lightning and have it strike maybe 2 seconds apart, so you know the main storm's about 2 miles off in the distance and is rolling in behind them. Almost like a precursor to the unstoppable sort of killer that's going to be slowly following them when the whole thing kicks off. Why I suggest Emily should be hit by the car is you want her to be semi-unconscious, so there's not a lot of questions they can ask her, and they're looking around the woods. It's unlikely that they're going to stay there and have a look and see what's chasing her. They're more likely to try and get her help because she's injured as well, an amnesiac, when they'll find out that later when she starts to become sort of conscious. I feel this is a better opener because it gets this scene over with more dramatically, and it makes it more urgent that they find help, and the gas station being the next thing on the road makes them buy that easier, rather than her just being like, well, she's awake but she's a bit sort of scared and doesn't really know what's going on. They could take her anywhere that way, but this is the closest thing. You could even have like a road sign on the way they pass the road sign for the gas station, 1 mile, and then this whole event happens, so that gas station 1 mile sort of road sign is the sort of key which pulls them into the whole story more naturally. There's also an added necklace in this version where she's wearing this sort of mythos type necklace, which is a bit of a red herring. It does go into depth saying this could be a sort of branching plot for a sort of ongoing story, or lead them into some other grander campaign, and that is fine if that's what you want to do. However, as a red herring, it's too weak for them to really mess with it. It's something your players will probably laser focus on because of the just meting and the style of play that the sort of scenarios they've played before suggest. So this thing must do something, and it could be the key to everything for them. So be warned that you may have to come up with something on the fly of how this thing will interact with the deadlight, or perhaps it just is just nothing to do with it. But I feel that would leave a sour taste, as there's not a lot of sort of ways it could be used adequately without either breaking the deadlight or, not actually doing anything, and could lead to a player death. So I would either come up with something that maybe it's luring the deadlight in certain directions, or it's always going to go after this amulet, but again, you're going to run into problems, as they can basically just use that to kite it around, and, well, you're into another problem, and you ruin the whole scenario and the setup and all the tells and everything. So I would just eliminate it. When the players do get to speak to McAlea, she will ramble. I feel that most of the suggestions and information she gives is reasonably useful, but a bit random. Some better tells would be how she reacts and how she acts emotionally to certain conditions once she gets to the diner, once she's in the car. Someone that's seen the deadlight out there and the confrontation in the house, she would like jump at and flinch at lights being turned on, or lightning strikes, or gunshots. These can trigger memories in her, as she sort of is jump started almost, and she says, "Oh, my grandfather's been shot, and that's why I was running through the woods," and urges the player that she has to go to the cottage. My group also tried to use hypnosis on her and bring her out of her amnesia quicker. I allowed this to some degree, but it kept on getting pushed into using more and more hypnosis, which I feel was trying to sidestep the intrigue of her situation, and I'd shut that down hard, and I did there as well. I basically had the old man be sort of arrogant and almost immune to hypnosis, and it's one of these skills that you have to really be aware of as a keeper, because it can be something that can be used gamey to like almost like a truth serum. Oh, I must find out X, Y, and Z, so I'm going to do this. However, remember, in real life, that if someone doesn't buy into the idea of hypnosis, they're unlikely to be susceptible to it. The gas station is supposed to be the place the group take McAlea, and with that early sign telling them it's a mile down the road and the urgency of her actually being injured, should it sort of almost urge them to go in here. To go on top of that, there's a massive flatbed lorry which is sitting on the road crossing it, skidding to a halt, and there should be no way past. Even though on the map it does look like they could just fucking drive around it. So I would definitely make sure that it's pointed out that they can't get around it. The ground is too muddy because of all the rain, and if they do try that, their car will get stuck. So pulling into the diner, you should like really ramp up the sort of growing gale as they sort of like see the sort of like safe haven of the lights of the garage and diner, and they'll start to head inside to the inviting warmth and maybe mild music in the background as the radio sort of plays, like unaware of the sort of growing dread that's in the situation. Here the scenario really gets good. Inside, we meet most of our cast bar one, and with Emily brought inside, the story of the underlying tale can start to unfold somewhat. Here the author has created a vast well of good characters to get attached to. Whether it's a doting and loving old couple that can make a killer apple pie, or the loathsome pig farmer that will be sexist and rude, these are ripe to evoke emotions in your players, and you should do that in them at every opportunity before using them as victims for the deadlight. Getting the players connected in some way, either love or hate, get that emotion out of them, will make this scenario so much stronger. I had a player that I made the ex-flame of the old woman, himself in his 70s, and he lost touch with her, and now she has this husband who happened to be his rival at school, and this built up a story and investment and a hatred and a sort of longing for sort of a lost, old, forgotten romance in this player, and damn, it was emotional, and when people started dying, it only just got worse. To do this, you need to milk the safety of the diner for a while, a lull in the storm almost, to establish this cast. It should be relatively safe, or feel relatively safe, as the tension focuses onto the cast and McAlea and why she was running through the woods. These are problems that the players should be catching onto and trying to sort out. There's also the pig farmer and his almost deadly encounter with the deadlight, and piecing these two together, they should be able to start to unravel at least the surface plot. With a fair few members of the cast in there, you need to start selling them by their actions. The manager, Sam Keelham, should take charge straight away and become ineffectual and just blundering, causing more problems than he solves, becoming outraged, and then perhaps heading out to the office in the garage to phone her grandfather, reassuring him that McAlea is okay. He can return anxious as the phones are down, or you can have him not return at all, being an early death if you want to thin the herd. The waitress, however, is another story. Mary Laker. She should always be listening and reacting to any new revelations from McAlea, as she is in on the crime which has set the deadlight loose in the first place. But with no knowledge of how it went down, she has to sit tight and wait for her conspirators to come back, which we know that most of them won't. Don't be too subtle with this and offer up her confession if threatened, or perhaps have her look like she's lying to save her own skin, making up stories and excuses of why she got involved in this, but utterly not telling the truth. Give just enough of a hint that there's something up at the cottage and that she is part of this. You can either kill her off here, or you can have a run out of the night stealing a car as she goes to look for her friend. Yeah, it should be sort of like a sort of good setup for the final scene. I quite like her as a character, and I would keep her in it as long as possible, because she's mostly the one that will tell the story, not McAlea. It's all her, all the reason why all this has happened, and the emotional impact of Mary Laker is strongest when she has to react at the end and find out exactly what has happened getting to the cottage. As the players settle into the diner, and rumours about the deadlight come from the pig farmer and his sort of like angst, and the sort of revelations from McAlea and Mary Laker, you can throw in a few phrases here and there, like the rain lashes against the windows, signs are ripped away and are lost into the darkening skies. Radio broadcast tells about a class 5 storm pushing in and only travel when absolutely necessary in emergencies. Keep the escalation of the storm outside brewing and ramping up just in the background in your descriptions, and be subtle with like smooth undertones to your language, and try and like just pass that information over the players but not have them register or notice it. Then ramp it right up. Cars start moving slightly and then moving a lot more. Bins thrown against the window, cracking it and even maybe smashing it open, letting the blizzard and blustering sort of wind and rain straight in, a sort of like almost like a cold shock of weather as the window smashes. At this point, the deadlight should be seen in glimpses and small ways. If no one has wandered off and bumped into it already, it's a good place to have it sort of like amongst all the sort of moving wreckage or litter in the storm. The visuals of the car moving and being moved around by the wind, and again at the start, going up on two wheels, are both clues and tells to the player that if you try and drive in this weather, which is now even worse than it was at the start, it's going to be very, very dangerous. And it's a good way of giving that over that information without outright saying it in a sort of cold and offhand sort of way. When the deadlight shows itself and starts to go after the players, you have to take it slow, but be relentless. This is a serial killer style horror, only pausing to kill in horrific and maddening ways. have it disappear every so often to add tension, and it should be only seen in glimpses and noises as its victims are consumed in the darkness beyond at the very beginning before the true horror is revealed. Here it is time to put to use and murder most of those empathetic or villainous characters you've been building up connections with to get a good impact from the players when they die. Perhaps some of those will try and save these witless fools if you've built the connections strongly enough. The Deadlight can move through walls as well, and cares little for structures, and this revelation got at least one of my players killed. If a player goes down early, hand them a remaining NPC and keep the party moving. Pace and dread should build here. You need to keep on the pressure, and you need to make them flee the area of the diner. But if they don't, have the storm fell a tree and crash it into the diner, and better yet, use an electricity pole. As the power goes down and the sort of surging, whipping electrical wires cause the Deadlight to stall and spike, and show everyone that it does indeed have at least one weakness. An important tell. Having one of the NPCs mention the cottage is an old colonial building that is sturdy built and made of stone, and it should be a safe haven for the storm with its own generator. It should add to the sort of will of them to head up to the cottage, especially with Amelia worried about her grandfather and the hints of the robbery there. Everything is leading to this one place. The players should make their way up there without hesitation. If they choose the open road, chase them down with the Deadlight relentlessly and use the storm to its fullest to get them off the road. If they are extremely skilled, I would let them get away, but to be certain, the players should really buy into the story rather than trying to leave the zone. But that's up to them. However, if they don't want to engage in the story, they don't want to engage in the story. And this is probably one of my main problems with the scenario, is like there is ways of the players to disengage, and it comes down to a problem I had with one of my scenarios as well recently while writing. The best way to survive is not engaging with the content, as one of the playtesters put it, and that's a fairly elegant way of saying there's no good buy-in other than preservation, which is a negative way of getting rid of the problem. So it's not fun, it's not engaging. So you need to really hold them in here, you need to tar them in, and that can be a little bit contrived. While being chased by the Deadlight, the scenario gives some good advice on how to deal with the storm and moving through the woods and driving up to the cottage. However, I feel the idea of how to run a chase and the hazards and obstacles you could find should be offered here. Chases are like the bogeyman of the Call of Cthulhu rule set, and this scenario is a perfect teaching place for them to actually learn them in depth. Touching on both car chases and one on foot through the woods in a difficult environment like night and in a storm. This would be an invaluable lesson for most keepers to learn and put them through their sort of paces as a sort of training exercise almost. And planning ahead with hazards in the back of your mind would make sure that the pace of the race or the chase through the woods would keep going, and make sure that the Deadlight is unstoppable and it doesn't give no craps about the wind or the rain or the trees just relentlessly moving forward where they're struggling to trying to keep ahead of this thing. With only the lightning strikes causing any problems. Getting to the cottage opens the scenario up and reveals the plot as it's laid bare in a sort of graphic way, as they find out about what has happened to Amelia's grandfather and Mary Laker's plot to rob them. As the robbers that didn't make it lie dead, along with Mr. Webb, among the carnage, the urn that housed the deadlight sits empty and open. This is where you want to give them a moral dilemma, some hard choices on how to get the cat in the bag, as it were. If you have played the NPCs properly and you've given them that deep emotion and tried to connect with them, they can actually hit some very hard emotional ties home now. Mary Laker could become catatonic with regret, seeing the deaths that our jealousy has caused, just staring at the ruination in the living room. She might even offer herself as sacrifice, as a sort of penance for what she has done. The elderly couple might offer themselves, having lived full lives, to save other younger people, or hopefully one of the NPCs would maybe offer themselves as well, as one of mine did. With his love lost, my 70-year-old PC offered himself to the dead light with his lost love dead at its hands. He felt he was a willing sacrifice. There is also the loathsome pig farmer and the idiot manager. The players will probably hate these characters and see them as suitable victims for the deadlight to put it away, sacrificing it once they're marked. It's this time you need to play them as human and give them, though they're misguided individuals, they are people with families that love them, and they're needed to provide for them. It should be a hard choice. It should be a gut-wrenching choice to put the genie back in the bottle, and it should hit them hard. This scenario is always seen as a massacre, and it is the human edge which is underneath it, which people don't really talk about, which really makes it hit home. Doing the hard right thing, a moral grey that they must choose. You should make them feel. Make them choose as the deadlight slowly catches up with them and it enters the building to devour in an alien, uncaring way. In the end, this solution can be a lot of things, but for me, it's the human element and the motives that are bubbling underneath the sort of main surface plot that really sells it. And as such, I do feel this is a brilliant scenario, but a character-focused keeper who can really breathe life into them. Into the NPCs and players who are invested in their backstory and really get into their characters will get way more out of this than people who are running it as a purely slasher sort of kill count, sort of gore galore sort of scene. Even though that is perfectly acceptable and you'll always have a good time with this, it's just if you sell it properly, it is near perfect. And with that, I'll see you again some other time.
His head topples to the floor, expressionless. You fall to your knees and catch your breath. You're finally safe.